Hi, and welcome back to Football Made Simple.
The first leg of the Champions League was the center stage, as Pep Guardiola's City hosted Carlo Ancelotti's Real Madrid. In the end, the first leg ended 4-3 to City, thanks to goals by Jesus, Foden, Bernardo Silva and De Bruyne, whilst the dangerous duo of Benzema and Vinicius did the damage for Los Blancos. The XG showed City were dominant in terms of chances, but what tactics did both managers use? Let's take a look. And if you want to take your enjoyment of the game up, I'm happy to be working with my fantasy football app of choice yet again, Spitch. Spitch is my favorite fantasy football app, as not only can you play for free and still win cash prizes, the scoring system is much more interesting. It's not just goals and assists, so players also get points for passes, tackles and interceptions, meaning that all 11 players are crucial. Even better, Spitch's overall scores and prizes is reset each week. So, if you join today for example, this week you have as much chance of winning a prize as anyone who started playing on match day 1. So, download Spitch for absolutely free through the link in the description below to give it a go, and to help support the channel. Also join the FMS EPL community on Spitch, link down below, and I'll shout out the best performers. Currently it's available in the UK, Germany and Austria, 18 years old and up, and you need ID to fully register. We'll begin with City, who did have more of the ball. City were often able to get on the ball deep, as Real were not always looking to press high up. And Real could defend in a traditional 4-5-1 shape, but we often saw one of the midfielders push up high alongside Benzema, so that both City centre-backs would be under pressure and potentially be forced to play backwards. But Pep's use of his fullbacks was interesting on either side. They could both invert, in a reversion to tactics we saw with the earlier City sides. This could be why Guardiola, rather than using Jesus out wide with a false 9 as we've often seen this season, had two genuine wingers, who in these situations would now be isolated in 1v1s against their fullbacks where they could look to take on their man. This was facilitated by Bernardo and De Bruyne initially pushing high up into the half spaces to force the Real fullbacks narrow so that the wingers could now receive. We see some of this in City's first goal. Stones is initially inverted so Vinicius is narrow when defending, while De Bruyne and Bernardo are high in the half spaces. And although Vinicius tries to recover, Mahrez is already taking on Mendy in a 1v1, and Bernardo's run from the half space drags Alaba out of position. So now Militao's in trouble, as when he looks to track Jesus, it allows KDB to make the run on his blind side, leading to the goal. The right backs were slightly different, as Stones would almost always hold his position deep, but when Fernandinho came on, he could stay deep from where he was a much more adventurous passer than Stones, looking to play runners in. But he also had the option of going up on the overlap. But the left hand side was key for City. As discussed, they could facilitate the 1v1 for Foden. However, both De Bruyne and Zinchenko often looked to move to the left to facilitate the overload. This would mean that City would consistently have 3v2s in this wide region. So if Rodrigo was high pressing, with Foden holding the width, De Bruyne would often have space in this middle region. And in fact we see a combination of all of this for City's second. Both Zinchenko and Stones are inverted, and we see Zinchenko beginning to move wide to cause an overload with Foden and De Bruyne, who's also wide. Rodrigo is caught pressing higher up, so now when KDB drops into the previously discussed space, Carvajal follows him, meaning that Foden has space to receive over the top. This drags Militao out of position, and Carvajal has to cover. So now when the ball is played back, De Bruyne has acres of space because of that left hand side overload, and his cross leads to the goal. Ancelotti did look to adapt to this by bringing on Camavinga and allowing Valverde to move to right wing. Valverde is a much more disciplined defensive player, so he would often drop deep into the right wing back position to form a back five for Real when they were defending. This would prevent them from being overloaded as much on the left hand side, and Real could now also look after the men in the half spaces more effectively. But what happened when Real were in possession? City for the most part looked to defend in a 4-4-2 with KDB and Jesus. and this might have caused concern for City as they would be potentially overloaded in the midfield, but for the most part they handled this for a few reasons. At times, the front two would look to sit deeper on Kroos so that things were effectively evened up in the midfield. However, Real also built with Kroos as a single pivot, and for the most part Modric and Valverde were pushed extremely high up the pitch, so at times Kroos was isolated, so that City could afford to push an extra midfielder to press him. As Kroos' support was so high up, they were difficult to find under pressure. This made Kroos much less effective than he usually is. Presumably, Ancelotti set up in this manner, as if they did manage to get past this first wave of City pressure in the 4-4-2, either Modric or Valverde would be in a good position to receive and run at the defense, which we did see on a couple of occasions. But for the most part, Modric began to have to drop deep to assist Kroos in the build-up, to get out of sticky situations. Alternatively, Vinicius and Rodrigo in the deep build-up remained fairly high and wide, as due to City's high line, there was potential for finding either running in behind. This was in contrast to their roles higher up the pitch, where both tended to tuck in, as the Real fullbacks had the authority to push high up to provide the width. Down the right in particular, Foden could be caught defending too narrow, so there was often an opportunity to overload the left back, but Real could not make the most of it. Overall, it's a result that keeps the tie in the balance, which will be disappointing for Pep, given how dominant City were during the match. But how do you see the second leg ending? Drop it down below. For the tactical score, despite the scoreline, there was a gulf in class, with City looking far superior throughout the 90, earning Pep a strong 8. Real on the other hand looked shaky at times, and were assisted by City's lack of finishing, meaning Ancelotti only earns a 5, but drop your ratings in the comments.
I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, you might enjoy the content available on my Patreon. Not only does Patreon help to support the continued production of content, as I am a one-man team, but it also gives you early access to videos that will come on the channel. You'll also get exclusive videos, get to vote on polls, and so much more. And it's cheaper than ever, no longer having a tier system, so everyone on the Patreon gets access to all the content. So head over to patreon.com/footballmadesimple to check it out.
And a special thanks to my patrons, including Adam Keating.
But that's all for today, and remember, keep it simple.